Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning. Thank you to all of you for spending uh, your time this morning to listen to my sharing on the topic of analytical thinking for researchers. So this is part of the Malaysian Society for Automotive Control Engineers Tech Talk series that we regularly do on Monday morning for about an hour kind of sharing session. So I know this is a public holiday today. Uh, so I would like to thank everyone who's joining this short presentation or short sharing by me. So my name is Dr. Rizal. I'm currently president of MACE and also currently the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academy International at University of Malaysia Perlis or UNIMAC. So this morning, I would like to share a bit on, especially to researchers, on few fundamental understanding of how analytical thinking works, how it works in relation to us doing research or to researcher, and probably to identify, giving example of some tools and techniques that one can use in order to solve some of the issues or problem, research related problem that we face, and also sharing complete the complete framework for managing issues, research problem from the perspective of implementing the analytical thinking approach. So, so what I'll be sharing this morning will be the overall process of doing the analytical thinking. Uh, that consists of defining the problem, formulating the hypotheses, collecting data or facts, conducting the analysis, also developing the solution problem. So we know that in terms of analytical thinking, there is a five-stage process. So we start with the problem, where then we generate the hypothesis or the probable solution or temporary solution, potential solution to the specific problems. And then, of course, we look at the facts that we have, the data that we have, and then what kind of approach or techniques that we can use to do the analysis, and also in order to arrive, for us to arrive to the best solution to solve that particular problem. So, of course, there are many uh, thinking methods or thinking approach tools that we can use as researcher. So one, you need the right data, of course, you need the right research approach or research techniques. But with all the available resources, or probably in some research, you need the high-tech equipment to enable you to do research. But all in all, it hinges on the ability for us to use to think properly, to think systematically, to think in a scientific way in order to ensure that you do not miss those important points, process or parameters that we need, by right we should have considered in arriving or reaching our solutions. So when talking about thinking, you have what we call the analytical thinking approach, which basically is the cornerstone of logical thinking and which was basically uh, support the critical thinking framework that we have. So if you have, if you've been reading about thinking approach, there are two big kind of domain of thinking. First is thinking to criticize or to see the strength and the weaknesses of such one idea or one proposition. The other big family of thinking methods is thinking tools to generate new ideas. So it's a two distinct method of that we can use in order to address a particular problem. Sometimes we have a problem and we have a potential solution, yeah. So we want to be creative, we want to be critical, or not creative, we want to be critical to the proposed method to see the strength and weaknesses of a particular proposed method. So that is purely being critical of it. And to be critical of it, you must be logical. And to be logical of it, the cornerstone is to be the cornerstone of all these two processes is to be able to think analytically. So this is when looking, evaluating a potential solution. Of course, the other spectrum, as I mentioned just now, is on the creative thinking side, which is on the idea generation side, because we need to use the right tools for the right occasion. For example, we are looking we are trying to generate as many ideas as possible. We need to put aside a bit on the critical thinking and look and use a creative thinking tools, because creative thinking tools is there in order for us to be able to generate ideas before we be critical of the ideas. So there are many tools available. Okay. So if you, I think this is like Bloom taxonomy for us in the university academic circle. We are very familiar with this Bloom taxonomy, and you can see that you have the 6 level, cognitive level, from the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and the highest is creating or design kind of ability to design new things. But I just want to bring you to the analyzing part, which is basically analyzing level of Bloom taxonomy is about breaking material or concept into parts, determining how they relate or interrelate to one another, and how it relates to the overall structure of purpose. So analyzing is about breaking into its parts or subcomponents and attacking or addressing the understanding the subcomponents that basically synthesize into a system or into one big problem. So I think so. This is a common understanding what analyzing means. And when you talk about analytical thinking, it is about that. It's about looking, breaking down problems, the big problem into its subcomponents, the smaller chunk, and trying to use available potential approach in order to solve that sub-components level of the sub-problems. So that means rather than trying to address the problem as a one big chunk of a problem. So if I can just compare in a more abstract kind of representation. So you have the analytical thinking and you have the system thinking. This is slightly, there's a where people coin. I mean, we have the parts that lead to a system. So in any system we have a subsystem. So if you look at the analytical thinking approach, you have the complex idea or complex problem that you want to understand. So this process of analytical thinking is to break down the complex idea of the complex problem into subcomponent and subcomponents. So this is how we and trying to address the actual or the detail, the micro level problem of that particular problem, rather than just look at the macro level. So you have the macro level, look at the bigger picture, and you have the micro level, looking at the details of the problem. Of course, you have for the system thinking, you have a complex idea, and you're trying to see instead of breaking down between the subcomponents and the detail of subcomponents, you're trying to understand the relationship or interrelation between the components. So this is slightly different approach in order to understand how the mechanism of a problem or the dynamic of a problem. So when you talk about analytical thinking, so you have the advantage, it's very structured, stepwise, very objective. It allows us to understand all the multifaceted processes that you want to have to go through. So, of course, in this particular example, you have disadvantage because it can break down the phase of complex. Because when you have a very complex problem, sometimes it's not easy even to identify the sub-problem, the sub-components of that particular problem. And it is also what we call specialist knowledge, and it is time and also resource intensive, time consuming. Because if you have a problem, you want to break it down, So it takes time, and it takes a lot of resources. But it's what analysis or analytical thinking approach all about. You want to understand all the contributing parameters. Of course, you have the intuitive style. Intuitive style means hunch, hunch, gut feeling or common sense kind of, where it's very time and resource efficient. It has a potential to tackle complex problem, but it is subjective and it is open to individual biases. The intuition sometimes based on experience. When you talk to, example, if you are a new lecturer, probably you just joined this is your first time doing supervising your research student. Your decision making may not be as sharp as those who have been supervising for, let's say, 20 years, 30 years. They have because they don't have to go very far, but they have the experience. So this element of experience uh, is what we call is the cornerstone of this intuitive kind of approach. Of course, there is what we call analytical and lateral. So if you talk to if you read on the thinking tools or thinking methods, there's sometimes they put it vertical and lateral. Vertical means crucial, step by step wise, and lateral means uh, it is what we call intuitive kind of the non-conventional way of reaching from A to B. That means what we are looking at uh, when we have a problem and want to, let's say, A is a problem and B is a solution. So sometimes when we talk of in analytical approach, there is a step-by-step process getting from A to B. It's obvious. And whereas from A to B, there is no, or for lateral approach, there is no obvious route from A to B, from the problem to the solution. And Edu de Bono is the proponent, or he's he's the person that proposed the idea of lateral thinking. He said, when we have a problem, normally we have certain assumption. We make certain assumption uh, that create certain perceptions, and we choose certain concepts, and we make certain boundaries to that particular problem. So lateral thinking is concerned not with playing with the sensitivity, but seeking to change those very pieces. That means in vertical thinking or analytical thinking, we always assume it must work within certain boundaries, within certain assumption, and within certain approach adopting certain perception. Whereas in lateral thinking, we seek to challenge the perception, we seek to challenge the assumption. So that allow us to approach the problem from a slightly different angle. I think this is very typical when we write things, right? I'm sure quite a number of people have got experiences of evaluating thesis, right? So we know that one of the in chapter one of the thesis, one of the important subsection is on the research scope in the thesis, PhD or master thesis. You have the research scope. In the research scope, it states the assumption of the research, the constraint, and the limitation of research. So normally, typically, as examiner, for example, you're going to evaluate the thesis. You do not going to question the student outside the assumption or outside the constraint, because the student have already informed what's the constraint and the limitation or the assumption which have been used for the research. So this is the exact point. That means in thinking, sometimes in looking at problem and trying to find the best solution, sometimes we are blinded by the assumption. We do not even consider to challenge the assumption. So this is what Edwin de Bono is saying. That means in lateral thinking, it is about changing perception, seeking alternatives. But all in all, let's say no matter when we use the, if I can just go back, if, no matter we use analytical thinking or lateral thinking, once we find the solution, all the steps that we've taken is very logical. That means, let's say we move using on the right hand side, you use the lateral thinking approach. A is a problem, B is a solution, and we use the non-conventional approach and we reach a solution. But when we work backward from B to A, from the lateral thinking approach, all the steps are, we'll find it very logical. It's very logical. Just we did not see it as obvious as we've seen after we saw the solution. So no matter which method that we use in research, at the end of the day, once we find the best solution, all the prior steps are very logical in its sequence. So lateral thinking techniques, I just digress a bit because I just want to have a very clear demarcation between lateral thinking and analytical. Lateral thinking is considered intuitive thinking. Okay? And then lateral thinking techniques that are it talks about alternatives, looking for new generating as many alternatives as possible. It talks about changing the focus, challenge premises, challenge some belief or some assumption that we have, toying with random combination, random formula. And in science, in the history of science, there are many findings which were found through not by intentional steps, but by accident, by chance. So it's not abnormal. It's not unusual for us in scientific discovery where people found new discovery based on by accident or by chance. It's quite common. That means, but once they found it, when they backtrack and look at the solution retrospectively, everything's become logical. So I always tell my students, no matter, it's like us, whatever situation or whichever situation we are in today, when we look back in our life, we can see that the events that occurred to us, that lead to brought us where we are today, is very logical. It's very logical. There's nothing unique. There's nothing weird about the process. But we never thought that we will arrive at this point in time. Let's say 10 years, 20 years before. So this is, but everything is logical. So lateral thinking is talking about that. It's trying to make the things which is logical retrospectively, but instead of that happen post, but we can look at the process prior, before it happened. Okay, so these are some of the methods that some of you have seen. This is how we generate alternative, generate new perspective. This is very popular, the 6 hats method of Edward de Bono, looking at when we wear different hats like white hat, red hat, yellow hat, black, green, and blue, and we take different assumption, we're going to generate different kind of alternatives. So this is the approach of lateral thinking. So basically, the model of analytical and creative problem solving, or including in that is the part of it is lateral thinking. There are other methods. So on the assessing the problem, looking at the constraint, looking at the rational problem solving, also looking at the what are the conceptual blocks that contribute to that particular problem that we are trying to solve. I think, and nowadays when we talk about all this digital era, people are talking about computational thinking. Computational thinking basically to mimic the way we think, the process that we think into the computational platform that we have. So computers, etc. So we know for most of us, especially those in the science and engineering, we are very familiar with this computational thinking approach, whether we realize it or not. So where we build, we have the abstraction level, the low level abstraction, high level abstraction. I think For some of us in the engineering, from the engineering fraternity, we remember learning machine codes, assembly language, which is a low-level abstraction. Then we start to learn about, I think, Pascal, C++, C.NET, and it starts to move into the higher level abstraction, where a simple code can mean can represent a very complex operation. So that is about abstraction. Then from the abstraction, we talk about algorithm, how we compute steps that we take in order to compute certain process. So remember from there, we talk about pattern recognition. Based on the algorithm that we have, we can start to do pattern recognition. Of course, nowadays, it is being used widely in so many, just take, for example, on the artificial intelligence or IR 4.0 era that we are in now. There's so many pattern recognition based applications for real life kind of real industrial applications. Then, of course, you have the issue of in computational thinking that you must be able to identify everything. You cannot have something like us human. Of course, Allah Ta'ala has created us that we have this ability to create things, to create ideas. Okay. So, but if you have a robot, AI based robot, and I ask a robot to draw a tree, he will draw a tree based on the definition of a tree that we have given to the system. So, which we have probably we say that the tree have a trunk, the tree have a branches, and the branches we have leaves. The leaf is like this color, this shape, etc. So basically, it needs to be defined in detail. If not in detail, like a very descriptive way, at least the framework must be defined to the system. But for us, we know our brain, we can capture it and we can draw them. That means the way computation thinking that we used to be studying before and how they are being implemented today are basically is mimicking what we are able to do as a human. Okay, tak apa. Let us move forward because I think spend about quite 20 minutes just background. So basically, when we talk about scientific methods, so we are researchers, right? We are all researchers. If you remember, I've said earlier, there are 5-step framework for analytical thinking. And this 5-step framework is basically common sense. It's not something like you've never heard of it. It's common sense, and this is what's lacking today. Common sense. Sometimes, even in research, students are lacking this common sense in terms of looking at the process, the process in terms of experiment or simulation that they've conducted, and also the quality of data that they got. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but because sometimes the data doesn't make sense, but because they say, "Oh, I've implemented the method as accurate as possible, so I trust the data." But actually, the data is wrong. It's illogical. But so sometimes common sense is lacking. But this common sense can be structured, can be put into a framework to ensure that whatever data that we have is trustworthy and reliable. So in the scientific method, we have the prior knowledge, we have a problem, we have an idea of how to try to solve the problem, and we make discovery, we test different methods, etc. And once we got certain level of results, certain amount of results, which we assume is which we trust, and we have certain level of confidence, we submit to the third party verification. So this independent verification, we look at our background of our research, our assumption, our experimental setup, and look at the data, the simulation data, numerical data, analytical model, etc. And they start to see whether it's replicable or not. And then if it's replicable, etc., etc. So that means there is a process of understanding the problem, the process of doing an hypothesis or temporary solution or probable solution of the particular of how to address that problem, testing the hypothesis, evaluating the data, and making conclusions. So these are the 5 steps that we do but actually we have been doing in when we do research. So of course, there's always the issue of assessor, the third party or independent verification. I think this is common in research. So that's why it's not something unusual for a paper to be withdrawn from conferences, from journals, especially from national journal, because people found that the data are very suspicious because it's not replicable. When people try to replicate or try to repeat the experiment, nothing works. Or when even they use the same parameters, so people start to challenge the prior data, the initial data. So this in the cycle or closed loop cycle of verifying, independently verifying the findings and the approach, is quite common in the scientific approach, in the scientific community. So once it is verified, of course, the outcome is recognized as major contribution in the field. So this is common, I think. So of course, some of us we took from the deductive approach. Some of us look from the inductive approach. So deduction means you have a theory, you have a hypothesis, you have an observation through experimental, then that confirm the theory. Or you have an observation, you observe some pattern, you formulate a hypothesis, and you prove that that theory explains the observation. So this is deduction and induction. These two methods are commonly acceptable in scientific community. Just these two will come from the example. If you remember the theory of gravity when Newton was presumably, this is not it was not scientifically proven that Newton was sitting under the apple tree and the apple fell. One apple fell from the tree and fell in front of him, and that started him thinking about gravity, the force that pulling it down, etc. So this is inductive kind of observation pattern, then theory of gravitational forces, etc. by Newton. So, and there are many like theory, and for example, the theory of relativity, coined by Einstein. It was a deductive kind of. He came out with the theory, but when Einstein came out with the theory of relativity, nobody knows what to do with it, and nobody understood him. So, but now people understand. People understood the concept, how it can be used. For example, in the quantum computer revolution, where the quantum computing approach is it will revolutionize the computing world, because the binary approach of 1 and 0 can now in the quantum world at any one time it can be 1, 0 and any other number. It's not binary anymore. It can be triple and quadruple, and they can have multiple conditions at any one time. So this means that we can do very intensive processing in a split second kind of time. So this is a concept of gravity from inductive approach and relativity from deductive approach to confirmation. So there are established process of thinking that we have been deploying. But all in all, as I mentioned much earlier in my presentation, that it's not about. It is true that we need to have the right problem, we need to have the right data, we need to have the right tools, but the most important thing, we need to have the right thinking framework to put all these things together. If you don't have the right thinking framework, then there is a problem. I'll give you an example. When we as a supervisor, for example, sometimes we supervise a PhD student, a graduate, and this student is a good worker. That means you can, but the only problem, he do not know what to do the next day. He has to wait for the instruction of the supervisor. Okay, you do this, you do that, you do this. That means, as a worker, research worker, is very efficient. He can execute whatever instruction be given to him, like a computer. But why he's doing that, and what's the way forward, he may not be able to do. That means this is an example of when research are moving, but there's no thinking in it. There's no thinking happening from the student perspective. They're just executing the instruction of the supervisor. That's why, as I said, I've shared in a number of places that, from my perspective, the whole purpose of doing PhD is, at the end, is to produce an independent thinker, a thinker, not so much a lecturer, but a thinker. Because a thinker, they can think on their own. They can make decision. They can make deduction, induction, reasoning to reach to a conclusion by themselves, and confident enough in doing that. So this is the, so in, if you look at the slide that I have here, so when we talk about the process of research, so we always have these five uh, steps. Five steps. We have the identifying the question. What are the questions? What are the problems that you want to address? And then we want to formulate the goals or objective for the research. Of course, the question, that means from the research background, we identify what's the specific research problem or what's the problem statement for that research. And then we formulate the hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? Hypothesis is the temporary solutions or probable solutions. So once you prove it, it becomes thesis. Hypothesis becomes thesis because the hypothesis has now been proven. So it's not temporary. It is the solution. So you have hypothesis defended, become a thesis. So this hypothesis you need to plan in terms of research, methodology research, how based on the goals. So how are we going to tackle, how are we going to conduct or address, attack the problem? So you have the methodology, you have to have the data, you have to have the in order to get the data, is it purely numerical data, is it simulation data, experimental data, even experiment, is it lab experiment or field experiment, etc. So you have this plan or design of your research. And in all this, there must be thinking. The thought process must be running. It's not just employing what's proven out there. And we know that I think the advantage of engineers or researchers or analytical thinkers is that, like I'm sure most of us, is that we know that all problems have certain, we have to make certain assumptions in order to tackle any problem, and based on the assumption, we know our solution will have certain constraints. It won't address everything. So, and in order to select the solution, we always have trade-off. So as an analytical thinker, we always try to approach any problem as systematic as possible. At the same time, we realize that there's always constraint, and with the fact that we have to make trade-off in order to reach to the acceptable solution. We can, I think in research there is no such thing as perfect solution. There's always the most optimized solution for that particular situation. Perfect solution, I don't think there's always a perfect solution, because as long as we are modeling the world, we will not be able to represent the true solution, because model means we are not capturing everything. Probably some models are very extensive, some models are very simple, but no matter how extensive our model, we always will meet certain parameters. So that's why it's like the debate between analog and digital. Like digital will never capture the total complexity of analog world, but we can make do with digital, because if not, we cannot process with computers, etc. So first step, second step, third step, and the fourth step is to generate as much results as possible, the quantitative and the qualitative, from the quantitative point of view and the qualitative point of view, in order to interpret and draw conclusion whether for us to prove whether our hypotheses are correct or not. So these are typical process of research that we do when we do research, whether within the confine of the university or when we're doing with the industry. Of course, I think based on my own experience, when I think most of us when we do research in university, we have the limit of time. Our timeline is always about 2 years, 3 years. But when we do research with the industry, it's always about 3 months or 6 months. Rarely that you do research in industry, they talk about 2 to 3 years. It's always about months. But for us, when we do research in university, we're talking about 1 year, probably 4 years, 5 years. But this display will affect the way the mode of research, how fast or how efficient is how we implement our research. So the rest of the slides basically is going to define the 5 steps. So this is going to be a lot of slides, but I will skip most of it because I want you to basically capture the framework of the analytical thinking approach. If you can capture the essence of it, I think I will be satisfied enough. But basically, in research, you will start with, if you look at at the top right corner of the slide, you see the problem. Then you see the first is the problem identification. So basically, of course, I will share with you the slide. It's a common knowledge, but I will share it with you. So a problem is a situation. It's just something that needs to be corrected. Okay. So and we need to, and in research in our domain of work, the most critical part is to define to identify the correct research problem. So I think you've read, hopefully I'm sure you've read this saying that if you have defined your problem well, the difficulty is not to find the solution, but to identify the problem. I think in research, if we can are able to identify the problem as detailed as possible, the solution will be obvious. But if we are very blurred about the problem, the solution will not be there. The solution will be will not be the right solution because we are not. How can you come up with? How can we reach the destination if you are not sure where you want to go? Wow. So we need to know where or what problem that we're having before we can judge whether the solution will be reliable or not. So it is our responsibility as a researcher to ensure that we are addressing the right problem. And in this, we need to have the right thought process, the analytically breaking down the problem. Often when I evaluate thesis, postgraduate thesis from a number of universities, often including my own university, often the student did not manage to clarify the problem, specific problem that leads to the novelty. They start to talk about the general problem, from the general perspective, and not being able to identify the specific problem, and yet they are claiming novelty on the specific solution. So these are very fundamental issues that need to be addressed. How we break down the problem, and in order to break down the problem, we must be able to propose. Okay. Of course, the second is to formulate the hypothesis. As I said, the hypothesis is a tentative explanation of an observation, or is a temporary solution or probable solution to a problem. So, it can also be hypothesis can also be, for example, from the perspective of the root causes of the problem, and we want to break down the problem into key drivers or what we call the root causes. Okay. And then, of course, the third one is to collect the facts, the data. Do we have enough data? If I take an example, when we use a neural network, back propagation, etc., radial basis function, etc., to train, etc., you need to have enough data to train the network, enough data to test the network, right? So this number of data is important, and it depends on the application. So data is important, and the quality of data. So collecting the facts, meaning meaningful information which has merit, that is qualitative or quantitative to your from the qualitative and quantitative perspective. So the quality and the amount or the quantity of the sample or the data must be sufficient in order to help us to meet our criteria. So, so you need to gather relevant data, relevant information, etc. For example, if I give you an example in robotics, for example, if you are doing the MSc level research, probably doing simulation is enough. I mean, not doing the experiment, stopping just at the simulation level is enough, because the data is basically, it would be sufficient in order to justify a potential solution to a problem. But if you are doing PhD, for example, doing simulation in a robotic kind of topic will not be sufficient. You need to do experiments, field experiment to verify your model. So probably different level of, let's say, masters and PhD will require different level amount of quantity and quality of data, because it depends on how extensive is our claim, will be our claim. Of course, MAC you talk about improvement, whereas PhD you talk about original contribution, really original novelty that we have produced from our research. So third is about collecting the facts. We need to know how. So, and the fourth is conducting the analysis. How do we analyze the data? So just want to recap. These are the four process of analytical thinking. This is the framework. I just want to you understand the framework, so that when we talk about analytical thinking, it's not something like from Mars or something. It is about what we're doing. But I want us to be able to put it in a proper framework. So problem, hypothesis, getting the facts, doing the analysis. So doing the analysis means the deliberate process of breaking a problem down to the application of knowledge in various analytical techniques. Depending on the topic of research that we are doing, we will deploy different method of analysis to our data. Okay, some of us probably using probably a simple standard deviation analysis, or correlation, or cross correlation, or alpha cross correlation. Some of us will look at the root mean square error in order to judge our quality of data. So, but this analysis that we do to our data will be important in order for us to reach the solution. And then finally, the framework is about developing the solution. So, if we, and this is how also when we guide our students or when we do research, we talk about retrieving the problem, generating hypothesis, collecting the data, doing the analysis, and achieving the solutions, or arriving to a probable solutions. So solutions are the final recommendation based on the outcome of the hypothesis testing, based on the data that we have done analysis on it. So then we reach to a conclusion. So if I can take you back to the definition that Edwin de Bono gives to the lateral thinking, the whole idea is to generate as many potential solution or possible solution as possible, and then to select the best solutions. So I remember I used to have one student, so he has a lot of acoustic signal data, but we need to filter the data. So he developed using, I don't know, probably some of you know, using FPGA. So he developed a particle filter, uncentered particle filter, a number of 4 or 5 in parallel, different of signal filtering, and he pumped in the data, and from the data, he will select the best solution. So this is the framework. That means from the potential analysis, we generate as many potential solutions as possible, and you select the best solutions. And of course, when you talk about solution in research, at the end of the day, people will ask you, how do we know how good your results are? So then you start to talk about benchmarking, comparing, and to indicate that yours are globally correct rather than low. It's not the local minima, it's a global minima, or it's a local pay by global pay. So that means you have benchmarked your solution. So these are the 5 framework of analytical thinking for researchers that we must be consciously aware of. That means when we do our research, that means we know that these are the steps that we are doing. This is the big framework. Okay, I think we may not have time to go through all the techniques, tools and techniques, but of course the rest of the slide will talk about potential tools and techniques that we can use to define the problem, etc. If I can just uh, go through, we have a few more minutes. Let's say, for example, we have like the 5 whys. I mean, if you want to, this is an example lah. If you want to identify the problem, they say, I think the Toyota company that came out with the 5 whys. That means if you want to identify a problem to a solution, the potential cost of a problem, or to identify the actual problem, you can ask up 5 times why. For example, your student told you that he has this problem, then you ask him or her why, then he can answer. So they say normally after the 5 why, you reach the actual problem. So these are the whole point is to identify the root causes of a problem or why a problem occurs. For example, someone is late, always late, coming to lab. So you start to ask him or her why. At the end you realize you got the actual cause of the problem. And there are fishbone design, for example, there's a problem, what's the cause of the problem, what's the detail of the problem. So I think it wouldn't be fair for me to go rushing through the slides. But my point is that if you look at the 5 framework, this is still on the problem identification, and I think this is the core is this: the 5. They say the 5 wife and 1 husband. So it's not that, but basically the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So it's like when you discuss an issue, the 5W and 1H will always help us to be clarified, be clear of what we are facing. So who, what, where, when, what, why, and how. So again, I think there are many things. If I can, I think I should just conclude. It's already more than so. So my point is that if I can just give you an example here, this slide. So, example, you have a problem, then you identify the root causes. What are the issue? What are the issue number 1, issue number 2, issue number 3, etc. And therefore, each issue, what are the probable cause or probable thing that lead to that particular issue? Number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. And then what are the key issue, or what are the key issue in each of the hypotheses that leads to that particular issue. And from here, that means this is a very obvious way of analytical thinking works. It breaks down the component, the subcomponent, the sub-subcomponent in order to solve in order to solve the big problem. So it addresses the details. What are the main issues? So when we talk about research, when we use the analytical to improve, we want to dig deep in terms of using a structured method in order to identify what are the key issues. I think this is important. I want to stress on it. Sometimes when we talk about research problem, we did not differentiate between major issues and minor issues. We start to mix them. Once we mix them, we may lose the ability to identify the actual problem, because we make the major and minor, big issue, minor issue, but we need to frame it up. We need to frame it out so that we can have everything clear in front of us. Okay, they are brainstorming. Let me just. So I just want to. Okay. I think I will share you the slides. Okay. You can have the slide, but the slide is it's not that it's not specific to engineering, but I think we can do it. So if I can just but if you see her, if you see this slide, you can see that based on the problem and potential solution at the end, when you finish the problem, hypothesis, facts gathering, analysis, and solution, it's always about benchmarking. So I think I recently evaluated the number of master theses. At the end of the day, I will always try to find the thesis where is the benchmarking. how do I know that the results are acceptable at the global scale, at the bigger picture, not just with regard to just that particular one particular project. Okay, so if I can just skip to the last point. Okay, sorry. So if I can recap, so this is okay. If I can leave you with this, so basically, these 5 steps, the normal typical process of research, basically mirror what we've been talking about from the analytical thinking perspective. That means we must make sure that when we do research, we always have this. We are clear on the steps that we are in now and the way forward. But I want to again differentiate between decision making and decision taking. So there's in the thinking approach, there's a slight difference between decision making and decision taking. Decision making means is to the process of generating as many potential solution decision possible. That means like Devono said, generate as many alternatives possible, whereas decision taking is to select one particular decision that you want to take. It's like if you have, like now, students are choosing for which university. Let's say you are best of student of your state, example, and you got many offers, right? So you need to do decision taking, and you need to decide. So decision making and decision taking. So that means in the solution side, on the final stage, is to be able to do the best decision taking in order to hope, so that we hope that will solve the problem. But at the end of the day, research is a very cyclic. It's a cyclic process. It's not linear. So normally, the best solution that we say is the best will never be the best. There'll always be weaknesses, and somebody will come, and probably we will still have to improve it. So basically, if I can summarize, so we talk about analytical thinking for researchers. So probably if we can, all these 5 steps will be crucial. So some students will pass step 1, 2, 3, but fail on step 4 and 5. Or some of us will step 1 until 4 is correct, but step 5, when we go for the selected the best solution, we flaw. We flawed. That means we choose the wrong solutions, or the wrong out of the many alternative solution or solution that we have. So we need to have this in mind, and the whole idea is if, as I one last time to recap to, is that it's not just about you have the right, but the right resources, and you have the right facility, but you must, in research, you must have the right thinking thought process embedded in that, so that when we finish and we spend the time and the resources, we finally will reach the best solution that we can possibly have. So I think that's about it. I hope you have gained something from my sharing this morning, and I have not bored you with my sharing. So I open, I open if there's any question from the, let me just check if there's any. Okay, I have 2 questions. Student always, there's one question I'm not sure for, but the question says that student always start while doing the literature review. Some of them will spend more than 1 year just to read and analyze the literature. What is your advice? What is the optimum duration to do literature review? Okay, literature review. I don't know if you are unlucky enough to have me as your external examiner, or lucky enough, I will ask you with the literature review. I will ask you this question: what is the purpose of doing literature review? So I will expect you to answer this. Literature review is a process of finding the gap. It's a gap analysis process, evaluation process. Gap analysis. A gap of what? A gap to justify the problem. A gap to justify the potential solution. I hope you catch my, you understood my mention. So that means a gap analysis. So for for master student, if the student is doing a master degree, typically, because the typical duration for master student is about 2 years, master by research, I mean. So normally we assume that not more than 6 months. Normally not more than 6 months. Whereas a PhD will be not more than a year. So if your student is still within 1 year and he has not finished his literature review for PhD student, I can still tolerate, because PhD level, they need certain level of, you must have novelty. You know, some people say, what is novelty? Novelty is just, for me, is adding a symbol A into the equation, or one symbol into the equation. That can be as simple as that. But bear in mind that adding a symbol to an established equation is not a simple task. You need to understand it. So that means for a master degree, if the student is within the 6 month period, so it is quite typical to allow them to continue within the 6 months. But after 6 months, they must complete their literature review. Whereas a PhD is normally for 1 year. But if the student has done the master degree within the same topic, not the same topic, but within the same domain, normally it will be shorter. Let's say for PhD, maybe 3 months or 4 months, even 5, or maybe not more than 6 months, because they already have a good solid understanding. But if you are new to the topic and you've never done any research on it, probably the typical way will be 1 year. But the thing is, it's not about the time, but it's about the techniques that we use in terms of documentation, in terms of what to read, what not to read. So some students, they do not have the, when you do literature, you have to read a lot of this stuff, and they do not have the right reading technique, documenting technique, and their mind is not critical enough, because not everything that is in the paper, published paper, can be 100% correct. There's always must be critical review of it. Okay, so my advice is that during literature review is also the time for the student to talk to others, discuss with the seniors, discuss with the supervisors, and this is where the supervisor role is important, because the supervisor can guide. But for me, my personal view, supervisor shouldn't dictate. That means you do this. Supervisor should guide them toward a path, but the student will find the topic themselves, but he or she should guide. I'm not, this is my school of thought lah, mazhab saya ni, saya tidak dictate, saya tak dictate lah. I can suggest, but the student will reach to the direction. And for some supervisor, they say you must do this. There's no right or wrong about it. It's just a approach. So for me, for literature review, that will be the time frame. But that means for masters, if after 1 year you have not, with all the help and support, you have not reached to a conclusion, something is not right. Somewhere, something is not right. Either the topic, you don't have the passion. For me, the most important thing is not for me, the most important thing is the student. How passionate is the student? How interested is the student towards the topic? Not so much the supervisor, but supervisor is there to guide, And then, as I mentioned, the duration, right? So which one comes first? Research title or supervisor? Okay, this is interesting. To be fair, I think your success will hinge on the supervisor. Success of a student research, I think, will depend so much on the supervisor, because if the supervisor is there to guide you, not to spoon feed you, to guide you, then I think you'll be. For me, if I've done my PhD 2 years ago, I would go for supervisor, because sometimes you got the best title in the world, but you have the most crap supervisor in the world, you will die. Because supervisor, he will impart the experience part. You will actually, in a viva process setting, the student is the most expert person on the topic in that room, actually. But that's why examiners normally they are not looking at the detail, the nitty-gritty of the novelty, but they are looking at the framework, the approach, the credibility of the process, simulation setup, for example, the theoretical understanding. Because in that particular room, the actual expert of that particular topic is the student. But normally, if the student cannot defend their methodology, defend their setup, defend their theoretical support background, normally that is the point that the student will say lah. So if you ask me as a person, Dr. Rizal, I will say supervisor lah. Of course, if you ask different people, they will say research title. But the point is, in PhD, you have a few elements lah. First, you must have the right supervisor to you, not to other person, but to you. Second, you must have the appropriate title that can that you're passionate about. Third, you must have the facilities, the resources, and of course, fourth, the environment. If you can have the environment. Normally, some people they like to work independently. Some people they cannot survive unless they work in a group. So it depends. So that's about it. I think to answer the question. Okay. So any yeah question only. So anything else? Okay. So I hope you have enjoyed listening to me. So and I heard you learned something. Not this morning on the public holiday Monday. So we will arrange so that the slide will be shared. We probably will inform to you how you can get all of the slides. And then if you would like to ask me other question, if I can just go back. Sorry, I can just go back. If I can just go back to okay. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me or any opinions that you would like my input, you can email me at rizal.arshad@unimac.edu.my. So I will not promise that I will immediately reply to you, but I will try my best to reply and to respond to you. So thank you very much to you, to all who have listened, and may Allah SWT bless us and guide us in our life, insyaAllah. Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.